Ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to the heart of our summit, which is the first panel discussion on leadership across generations. If there's one thread that connects every DOSCO across decades, it's leadership. From the playing fields of Chandbagh to the music schools to the corridors of power around the world, DOSCOs have consistently demonstrated that leadership isn't just about position, it's about purpose, vision, and the courage to drive change. In today's rapidly evolving AI enabled world, where traditional hierarchies are being redefined and generational perspectives shape every decision, understanding how to lead across generations has never been more critical. So, our moderator for this panel is Mr. Vivek Pandit, 595 Hyderabad House, batch of 1988. He is senior partner and global co-leader of McKinsey's private equity and principal investors practice. With over 25 years experience at McKinsey, he has worked across continents, advising the world's leading investors, sovereign wealth funds, and family businesses. A Stanford alumnus and Aspen fellow, he has served on the Doon School Board of Governors and continues to champion education and healthcare initiatives across India. I will also alongside introduce our distinguished panelists. The first is Mr. Gaurav Bhushan, 32 Hyderabad House, batch of 1989. He is the CEO of the lifestyle and leisure brands and chairman of Accor India. His inspiring journey started with Accor in Australia, where he rose through the ranks to become chairman of Accor India, home to iconic brands like Sofitel, Pullman, Novotel, and Ibis. He then became co-CEO of Ennismore, the world's fastest growing lifestyle hospitality group. Under his leadership, Accor opens one hotel per day worldwide across 135 countries, a masterclass in scaling leadership across diverse cultures and generations. Our second panelist for today is Mr. Tarun Sawhney, 234 Kashmir House, batch of 1991. He's the vice chairman and managing director of Triveni Engineering and Industries and former president of our very own DSOBS. A Cambridge and Wharton alumnus, he leads one of India's largest integrated producers of ethanol, sugar, and bioenergy. His leadership spans traditional industries and cutting-edge sustainability initiatives, embodying the evolution of corporate leadership across generations. Our third panelist for today is Mr. Raghav Maliah, 267 Jaipur House, batch of 1990. He is the global chairman of investment banking at Goldman Sachs, a role he assumed just this July, cementing his position as amongst the most senior Indians on Wall Street. With 25 years at Goldman Sachs, rising from associate to partner, he co-leads mergers and acquisitions in the APAC region and heads the Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Group, TMT. His journey exemplifies how sustained excellence can bridge generational leadership styles in global finance. And our fourth panelist for today, who will be joining us virtually, is Mr. Rahul Malhotra, 15 Hyderabad House, batch of 1983. He is the region head emerging markets and member of the Global Wealth Management Committee at Julius Baer. Based in Dubai, Mr. Malhotra oversees 5 key markets, including India onshore, global NRIs, Middle East and Africa, Central and Eastern Europe, etc. With over 35 years in financial services spanning Citibank, Merrill Lynch, and JP Morgan, he also serves as a member of the Julius Baer Foundation, working on global education and wealth inequality initiatives. His leadership philosophy spans from Singapore to Switzerland, making him uniquely positioned to discuss leadership not just across generations, but also continents. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 extraordinary leaders, each representing different industries, with an overwhelming majority of Hyderabad House alums, I must say, but united by the common thread of DOSCO values and the pursuit of excellence. Please come on stage.
Okay, so that was a formal set of introductions. I'm going to do a proper set of introductions now, if you allow me. First up, we have 267J, batch of 91. Now, a master he considered had a considerable influence on his life was Sheil Vora. He still has difficulty eating rajma. And Mrs. Sundar Kumar. He still avoids rajma. He allegedly spiked the punch bowl at Welham Girls. Now, Raghav Maliah, now, of course, the chairman, and it just goes to show that even a Maliah from J House can be successful. Thank you, sir. Next, we have 234K. He believes A.N. Dar was a very shaping influence in his life and school, permanently scarred by egg curry, will not touch it. He managed to bust midterms at Chile, Missouri, and did not get a YC. Meet Pumpkin, aka Tarun Sawhney, Vice Chair and Managing Director at Triveni Engineering. Then we have 32H, also known as Chut Dallas. I have no idea how you got that name, by the way. He hasn't eaten Rogan Josh since school. He managed to screen a movie in the physics lab, and I'm not going to name what movie it was. Some of you know this. Apparently, this is legend. Anyway, meet Chut Dallas, also known as Gaurav Bhushan, the chairman of Accor India and co-CEO of Ennismore. And then finally, we have 15H. There he is. That's it. A master that shaped his time in school was R.D. Singh. He still maintains a healthy distance from mutton stew. He never got caught busting bounds, even though he did a number of times. Meet Namchi, also known as Rahul Malhotra, who's a member of the Global Managing Committee at Julius Baer. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Namchi, for joining us from Dubai, I believe. Okay, well, I'm just going to open this by saying leadership is a topic that is much talked about, much written about. And so I think what we intend to do today is have an authentic, disarming conversation with these individuals about their journeys and what they learned. As we know, the first rule of leadership is that everything is your fault. The second rule is it's not about you. And finally, the third rule, as we know, is leadership is really about action, not position. And I think I want to reinforce that. Leadership is about action, not position. I think that suits the DOSCO ethos well. Now, in a time when we have winds of anti-elitism, anti-institution, anti-pluralism, navigating these forces takes a lot. And so with that, I'm going to start with a set of questions, and I'm going to make my way and sit next to you. What's that? Yeah. Okay, do we have a mic over here? Hello? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm starting with a kind of a softball question. By the way, I'm going to move after the first two questions to the audience and ask you in between to throw some questions. And when you have your questions, please direct them specifically to any of the panel members, and you're allowed to heckle them if you want. Let me just start with a basic question, right? Raghav, I'm actually going to start with you, which is your definition of leadership, and how has your definition of leadership changed over the time that you've navigated your own professional career?
Why don't I start with the second bit? So, look, I've worked for about 30 years now, and I've been fortunate to have, in that period, to have seen a number of different leaders in action. So, from government leaders to business leaders to, we're a people business, and in a people business, as you grow up, similar to the way growing up at the Doon School, you're people senior to you, you kind of value one person's leadership, and you can kind of distinguish between people who you think are good leaders and who you don't think are good leaders. So I do think I've had a decent perspective on what I think are good leaders, at least. And Mr. Kant touched on this a little bit. Any good leader, first and foremost, has to set the right vision. It has to be a shared vision. It's something that you've got to communicate and you get out there and get buy-in for. And then the rest of it is really just to create the conditions or empower teams to actually execute on that vision. You can have the best vision, but if you don't empower the folks around you to actually execute on that vision, then nothing's going to happen. So, look, it's a combination of that, setting the vision and empowering people to actually go out and do what needs to be done. That, to my mind, are the two simple characteristics of a leader. There's a number of other things that I'm sure we'll touch on as we go through this.
Same question? So, Vivek, we discussed this earlier, and
I represent the third generation of a family business. So I'll offer a different perspective from my own experience. I look at leadership much more from the perspective of stewardship. So I think classical leadership has been defined over and over again, but stewardship is something that also is absolutely vital, and no more so than in the world today and in India today. Leadership to me is not a race. When I started my career, I thought of it as a race. You must take decisions quickly. Inactivity is a sign of potential weakness. Rapid decision making is absolutely essential. But to my mind, it's much more of a relay. It's about grabbing that baton firmly, holding it securely, and passing it on stronger than when you first received it. So that's the real change that I've seen in Raghav and I are the same batch from school. I was there for the alleged incident at Welham Girls. In these 30 years, I've seen that change dramatically. I think India today also allows one to be a different type of leader. I think that's changed as well. The environment has changed. Amitabh Kant talked a lot about what he's seen change from a government perspective. But from industry and from an entrepreneurial perspective, I see that innovation playing an increasingly important role. Empathy is something that is an essential quality for leaders for today, especially if you want to encourage the younger generation of my children, to actually, again, take active leadership positions.
That's very helpful, and I dare say that from our time in school, we had to unlearn a lot of Machiavellian versions of leadership, where it was better to be feared than to be loved. But with that, Chud Dallas.
Vivek, thanks. I think for me, again, like Raghav, I've been in a people's business and a service industry almost all my career. And to me, central to leadership is embarking people and building a culture. If you cannot build a culture, you can't embark people and you cannot execute your vision. I mean, everyone's got great ideas. A vision only becomes a vision if you can execute it, and you can't execute it without embarking people. So for me, I spent most of my time in the various leadership positions I've been in embarking people and building the right culture. Because you build the right culture, if you want to build a spirit of entrepreneurship, you encourage people to take risks, you don't become a bureaucracy, no one's ticking boxes, no one is forwarding emails for approval. You've got to build a culture that empowers people, empowers them to take risk, empowers them to come and think outside the box. And it is a painstaking, slow process, but to me, central to all success, financial or qualitative in any organization, is the ability to build a very, very strong culture. And that will last you decades. And once you set that right, it's very hard to undo it, but it takes a huge effort.
I'm going to come back to you on that, because the hospitality industry is very specifically geared around culture and service. Namchi, to you. Okay, we can't hear you. Give us a second. Can you try again? No, we're having technical. One more try. Oh, there he is. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. So first and foremost, apologies, I couldn't be there in person much as I would have loved to. Gaurav did tempt me a few evenings back, but unfortunately just couldn't make it. Before I get to answer what you said, Vivek, just to echo and talk a bit about what Amitabh had said towards the end. I know the audience is ranging from a bunch of folks that are recent sort of graduates from school to retirees. And I can tell you that I have a father-in-law who's also a DOSCO. He's 91 years old and he's yet active. So I don't think there's ever an age for retirement. Yes, you have to keep reinventing yourself. There is so much access to information that we have today than against when we were growing up. So I would just simply say never retire in life. Once you retire, you simply go to your grave. Leadership for me, and I'll give a very different perspective to the three, and I 100% agree with what they had said. Leadership really evolves over the years, even when you start in your career. And growing up in India, working in the financial industry, one would elevate people to a demigod status. And anything and everything that they said was really the gospel of truth. You never debated it, and you said, we will follow, we will start to do exactly everything. That was one leadership style. And that's how we all started, or at least I started in my career. When you get to the mid career level, you clearly start to question and you start to really understand what exactly is it that's happening and what is it that I am getting from them. Am I learning something new? Am I learning a new skill set? What and how am I building a network? And then is really about, do I feel confident in the ability of that leader? So that's really important. I'll get to where I'm coming in with all of this. And now, in the stage that I'm in my career, it's about really grooming the next set of leaders. So a leader is someone that really has to have the ability to be able to deal with somebody who is just starting with their career to someone who is at the later part of their careers, and how do you take people through this journey?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn it up a little bit and just ask, none of you have got here without reflecting on mistakes you've made or turning points in your journeys. Maybe, Bhushan, starting with you. Any mistakes you look back on? Anything you had to unlearn as you traverse this journey? Because you've seen a lot.
Yeah. As you kind of journey through your career, and for me, when I was in the early parts of my career, it was very much about quantitative decision making. I spent a large part of my life doing real estate financing, real estate investment. So it was quantifying everything and thinking you're making the right decisions if it made sense on a spreadsheet. And as you kind of meander along and you build and grow your career and your business, you realize the EQ has to take over the IQ bit and balance it. Because if you only focus on the financials and ignore the human and the relationship element of every aspect of your business, you're going to make the wrong decision, no question. And I think every time I've tried to make a purely financial decision, it hasn't gone the way I expected. The moment I thought from my head and my heart, it always went, maybe we stumbled along at the beginning, maybe we made a mistake, but over a 5-10 year period, it always ended up being the right decision. So what I would say is, you've got to balance your decision making, you've got to balance your thought process, you've got to balance the EQ and the IQ. Otherwise, you're not making long-term decisions, which I think is fundamental to build a good business.
Raghav, I know you don't get to your position at Goldman Sachs by just hanging around. I know those are strong up or out cultures. You have a culture that even departners people. It's a tough, you've got to be at the top of your game every moment in this industry. Talk to us a bit about what you've learned, the mistakes you've learned from.
Look, I mean, there's kind of day-to-day mistakes and there's kind of bigger picture mistakes. I think if I think about this from where did I have a choice or a decision to make, and I made the decision which I later regretted, let's put it in the bucket of that. I mean, the biggest, we all like to plan things and say, okay, look, in 2 years I'm going to do this, in 3 years I'm going to do that, in 5 years I'm going to do that. And my original goal was to be in financial services for 3 years, and 30 years later I'm still in financial services. So I guess that was the first mistake I made, to have a goal which is 3 years, which was only 3 years. And then I decided to move out to Asia, and in 1995 when I first moved to Singapore, Asia was booming, things were great, everything was looking good, and then the first financial crisis, 97 financial crisis hits, and suddenly from being the hottest place in the world to be, it became the worst place in the world to be. Again, worked through that. Then I shifted my focus from being a kind of Asia-focused banker to being a TMT-focused banker, technology, media, and telecom. And then, for 98, 99, 2000 were great, and then there was the dot-com crash. So for a while, in 2001, 2002, I felt pretty lonely. Again, worked through that. For the next couple of years, things came back, things were good, and everything was going right for the financial services industry. And then we got 2007, 2008. So you kind of lurched from, looking back from 2008, pretty much every major financial institution in the United States, at least, was almost bankrupt. In 2009, I was kind of sitting back and thinking about it. I'm like, my entire career so far seems to be one crisis to another crisis to another crisis. But what it did tell me, though, is, the fact that I'd worked through the first one and the second one and the third one, there was some resilience in there. And resilience is another word that I associate with, developing leadership. Every time you stumble, you get up, you kind of dust yourself off, and you can keep going. So, and the last 10, 15 years have had their own share of crises, and frankly, when you get confronted with something, you look at it, you take stock and make decisions based on what you know, and try and make the best decisions of it.
Tarun, you've beaten the third generation curse, and you are still standing. Successful, and Triveni engineering is bigger and better than it ever has been before. Talk to us a bit about mistakes you might have avoided or lessons you've learned along the way.
So, interesting question, Vivek. I think my own experience as an entrepreneur has had a mixed bag of mistakes and successes. When I reflect on the mistakes, I can actually name examples. When I returned from my MBA in the United States, I set up a rural retail business. It was probably 15 years ahead of its time. So it wasn't a bad idea. In fact, it was a very good idea. It was just that it was challenging to execute that business. A few years after that, I started a film production company. Goodness, yeah. 15 years ahead of Netflix. but having a few failures actually and working through that is essential to becoming an entrepreneur. I hold my firm's more recent successes, entering into the ethanol business a decade ago, really supporting rural infrastructure, the rural economy, looking at the national energy crisis from a different perspective as a great success. More recently, I've had forays into supporting the Indian Navy, etc. Again, picking up on important themes. So I think, having that kind of resilience, I agree with what Raghav said. You've got to work through some failures. And I think as an entrepreneur and as a leader, to have a few failures in your career makes you harder. It makes you more resilient. And it adds to the experience that's so very vital.
Thank you. Rahul, Namchi, you're part of an industry that has been consolidating, constantly under pressure. Clients are constantly screaming at you for better returns, lower beta, and yet, driving you to, they'll always point out that the price of gold, you missed the price of gold and now the price of silver. So with that in mind, talk to us a bit about what you've learned. And by the way, you are among this group, the most senior of us.
I'd say senior by age, we've got 3, and including you, 4 great people on the platform there. So a couple of things I'll share with you. One is on people. Leaders that get emotionally attached to the decision on people, whether you are having them in your team or you've hired them, not the best thing to do. And I can tell you this by example. I hired somebody for a particular role, senior person, and it didn't work out. Except as a leader at that point in time, I just gave the person more time than he needed, and that was not the right decision to make. I stopped listening to what people around me were saying about that individual. So you got to really sort of put emotion aside. And I always say this to everyone right now: when you enter the door, check your emotion outside, because otherwise it starts to really influence everything that you do. So that was one. The second is that in banking, I inherited a client situation, and without getting into the detail, I looked at it and I said, okay, great. I will go with what my banker is telling me. And shortly thereafter, this could have resulted in a significant loss of in excess of $300 million for the bank. And thank God that we didn't go through that. But what I learned through there is really trust your team, trust your people, but verify yourself. Don't leave it to just what you see and you say, okay, go with it. I'm happy with it. You need to get into the weeds and you need to get into detail to spare yourself an issue down the road. And I'll say as a leader, the type of decisions that we will make in the gray zone, it's not always black and white. There are many decisions that we need to make in the gray zone, and hopefully we make more right decisions than we do, which is not good decisions, so to speak.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to the audience. We have time. I have a few more questions, but before we do that, if the audience, any people in the audience have questions for individuals.
Hello.
Harpal has a question here. Can you get a mic? Okay, fine.
Yeah, Vivek Bami from class of 1971, so I think I can pull seniority on all these guys.
Yeah.
To me, I think I was very glad to hear some of you talk about EQ in decision making and leadership. But to me, one very clear indication of good leadership is humility. And I would like you to comment on that as well. And secondly, linked to that actually is the whole idea of mental health. The WHO now says that the number one health challenge in the world is no longer lifestyle diseases, but rather mental health affecting every age group. So I want to know, you as corporate leaders, what do you plan to do, or how do you actually go about trying to tackle the mental health challenges of your employees and, of course, yourself? Thank you.
Terrific question. Who'd like to take it?
Maybe I'll take that up. I'll try to answer your question, sir. I think humility is fundamental. And that comes with, again, to me, building the right culture in your organization. And there's some events in your life that teach you humility like no other. And in our business, COVID was an existential crisis for us. For the travel and hospitality industry, it was, we thought we were done, right? Over a period of 3 months, we had to close down 5,000 hotels. Find an alternate and livelihood for 250,000 people, probably 80% of who live paycheck to paycheck and would see their family literally out on the streets if they didn't have a job. That, and trying to find a solution for that, teaches you humility. You know, we as business leaders kind of fly around all over the world and make, fairly big financial decisions and strategic decisions, but try to make decisions that impact the day-to-day existence of people that are literally relying on you for your livelihood, makes you very, very humble. And whilst you're trying to balance, the stakeholders as a public company, your share price, your P&L, your balance sheet, all of that together with having that approach of being a good human being, being a good leader and trying to manage your people, if you can combine, and the ability to combine all of that over a very, very difficult period, I think taught us a lot of humility. And that relates into mental well-being, because the well-being of a lot of our teams, I mean, people were stressed when you don't know where your next meal is coming from, and we were there with a lot of our teams. You know, we operate in 150 countries, and a lot of emerging markets where people, like I said, are living paycheck to paycheck. Mental health was a huge issue. So getting into counseling, getting to support, getting people to actually come in and talk about, we had closed down our hotels, but made them into community centers where people were coming in just to talk about their issues. We set up a $100 million fund just to focus on well-being of people. So those kind of episodes, those kind of periods in your life, I think they teach you to be humble and think about a lot of what you do outside of your business day to day.
Tarun, you want
Can I just jump into what he said, Vivek? I mean, just to add on the mental health, and I really like the question. A lot of organizations are really doing lip service and providing lip service to the issue. I think what we really need to do is to be able to first create a safe environment where people can talk about issues that they're facing. I remember earlier in the career, and started my career in India, you didn't even think, or you didn't even warrant, or you didn't even know what you were going through and whether you could surface that. And people would literally turn around and say, is the guy bonkers? Is he mad? Has he gone cuckoo or whatever? But so the first is you need to be able to create that safe environment, to be able to come up. The second, the organization needs to be able to build and create the right tools that are available to the individual, where the individual should not fear a backlash, should not fear that he or she is going to lose their job. I think the organizations that do that well are the ones that will be better hirers and will attract more and better talent.
Thank you. Why don't we actually go to the next question? Although I'm very happy you asked that question because mental health is severely overlooked. Even today, it impacts many more people than we want to believe. I know, Harpal, you had a question. You want to...
Well, it's great. It's great hearing the answers to those terrific questions. Can I request that if all of you were to leave the next 2 decades aside and think about futures in your respective domains 20 years hence, give us some insights on where you think the world will be 20 years from now and not the immediate.
I'm happy to sort of kickstart things. I work with 350,000 farmers a day. The average age of the farmers that I work with is about 60. Nobody in the younger generation wants to get into actually a very remunerative activity. And so the landscape, as far as rural India is concerned, which I know quite a lot about, is going to be completely different. The opportunities that exist, the reformation that has to take place, and is taking place very slowly and steadily, it will take a period of 20 years, but we're going to see an enormous change despite and in spite of the laws of the land. So I foresee a huge amount of actual investment happening to where 70% of our population resides. New opportunities, new industries, new service areas. And for me, that is a huge, I mean, that's enormous opportunity. It's very, very exciting. So let other people add to that.
So, Harpal, we sit and talk about this sort of stuff every day, right? At the end of every year, most financial services firms will put out a kind of forecast of what we think is going to happen in the next year and then what we think is going to happen in the next 20 years. But just coming back to our industry, look, this is an industry that if you think at its simplest form, what does it do? It empowers other industries to actually do what they need to do. Whether it's, as Mr. Kant put it or as Tarun put it, whether it's, empowering farmers to go do what farmers do. The basic tenets of what the financial service industry has done, in 2008, when I was going through my kind of, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life moment, I was asking myself, I'm like, is the financial services industry going to survive, or is it going to get taken over by governments and all that sort of stuff, right? But the basic tenets of what we do has happened since the beginning of human beings, right? The intermediation between one person and the other person, making sure that, if capital is in one place, it goes to the place where it's actually needed. A lot of that is not going to change because that need isn't going to change. But what's going to change is how it takes place. In the last 20 or 30 years, I remember the time in the 1990s when the public sector banks, there used to be strikes because they didn't want to do computerization, right? From that generation, we moved to, bank account getting opened very, very quickly on your mobile phone. Similarly, internationally, from there being, 18 different currencies in the European Union, they became one currency in the European Union, capital flow, that accelerated a whole amount of capital flow. So we'll still see, and with AI, a lot of what we do is becoming, the big debate in our industry right now is AI going to be good for our industry in terms of jobs, or is it going to be bad for our industry? Again, all of these things, while they seem very, very big and very important, and they are, it doesn't change what is needed. It doesn't change what the industry does in the end. It changes how it does it, and it makes us more efficient. It makes capital flows simpler and cheaper. I mean, if you just come back to the 1990s analogy of computerization, right? Every bank teller thought they were going to be out of a job. Today, there are more people working in banks in India than there were in 1990 because the entire industry grew. So while the basic function is not going to change, what's going to change is how it's done, and hopefully that's for the better.
We take one more question in the back there.
Yeah, hi Mallo. This is Jagu here from Vishal Sena. So for those of you who don't know, Mallo and me were together in the same room in 1978. And, the Malhotras were well-fed boys, to put it mildly. And then they started working out, and they became role models for a lot of us. So these guys have been leading from a long time. And good to see you, Mallo, looking so fit. I just wanted to ask you, how much of this fitness do you emphasize for leaders in their leadership roles across your organization?
I can't just more than emphasize the need for us to be fit. All of us travel a lot, we meet people, we're on the road, we're working around the clock. If you're not fit, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to do it. I mean, I turned 60 this year. I believe I'm fitter now than I was when I was 50. Definitely fitter when I was 30. So you need to be literally out there keeping yourself in the best condition. And the good news is that you have so much that you have access to in terms of development that is happening in science. So thank you for that comment, but you need to be super, super fit to be able to do these roles and then hopefully lead a good, healthy life.
We're going to take one more question.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. I suppose Harpal and I, being the 65 batch, are the senior statesmen, so to say, and we still have our faculties, at least we think so. Harpal and I think 20 years from now we may be dead, Harpal, so it shouldn't matter. But what do you think would be the role of, from Sachs and Julius Baer, role of cryptocurrencies, and how would transactions take place? Besides, we all know there'll be electronic, and I have an investment company. We're small kids like you guys. We only have about 15 billion in assets. But how do you think it transpires with exchanges and currencies?
I think, Raghav, that's directed to you and to Rahul.
Okay, let me take a stab and then let Raghav respond. So, when we are often asked, what will the world look like 20 years from now? Take a guess. Anyone's guess. I don't know, we don't know. But what's important is what we will do now and what we will do over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to shape what's going to be really 20 years in and from now. So as much as it's important for us leaders to really have a 20-year vision, you've got to really break that up in sort of multiples of 5, 10, and then sort of track to that. To answer your specific question, firstly, this industry, and speaking to the banking industry, it's very clunky. It's not the great experience that you would want to have if you would like to be able to deal and work with the bank. Have we made progress? Yes, we made significant progress. But looking forward, it needs to be a lot more seamless. I think AI, which is just at its extreme infancy, is going to definitely play a role in getting there. I'll keep it brief, but what I will say definitely about digital assets, crypto, you should have, and this is not Julius Baer speaking, this is me, Rahul speaking, between 1 to 2% of your investable assets in crypto. You figure out what really works for you, but I would highly recommend that. But again, keep in mind, 1 to 2%, don't come after me. Hopefully 20 years from now, like you said, you may be dead and gone, but keep a small portion in that. It's good to be able to take some exposure.
So I have a Bitcoin model, and according to my Bitcoin model, in 2028, Bitcoin should hit $326,000. Does that answer your question? How many Bitcoin do I own? 0. Again, it's all a function. Till last year, any of us regulated financial institutions could not actually deal in Bitcoin. Now we're all, there's a post, kind of Trump's embrace of everything crypto. There's there's a little bit further. Everybody's gone a bit further. You've got some ETFs. You've got stuff like that that's coming up. The second biggest economy in the world, China, bans Bitcoin. Gradually, there's more of an acceptance to all of this stuff. Is this, I don't understand. I'm a skeptic, by the way. I've always been a bit of a skeptic. It's the underlying technology is fundamentally very, very, very good and very good, and has lots of uses. But what you do, other than Bitcoin, all the other stuff, I just don't know what's going to drive it. I've inputted a couple of things. Said, okay, fine. On a good case scenario, it should be 600,000. On a bad case scenario, it should be 326. On a bad case scenario, you get a couple more frauds, it'll go back down to something else. So whenever there's an asset class that looks at it like that, I just don't know whether I would recommend that I buy it myself, and therefore I don't know whether other people should buy it.
So I'm going to come back. Ask me. Well, I think we're sort of getting to time here. I have a one-line view of this. If you believe the world wants a parallel system at a high level, and you believe the world will entrust blockchain, and it is more trustworthy than your average central bank, and what it does with and how it assigns ownership and digital rights, then I think you can assume that Bitcoin will, in fact, continue to have demand. Not just Bitcoin, Ethereum. There's a whole slew of them. Simply because there's a aching demand for an alternative. Now, this is not an argument on fundamentals. There's no intrinsic value behind stored value, but it's an argument. This is not like a commodity, but it's a stored value mechanism that is finding greater favor with people who are falling out of love with the dollar, falling out of love with commodities that are cyclical, and falling out, yeah, absolutely. But with that, I'm going to, yeah. If you believe that, then the parallel economies will be much larger than it is today. Yeah, that's the point. So I'm going to, I know we're coming at time. I'm going to do a rapid fire set of, just a question for each of you. Anything that you learned, anything from your time at Doon, just 30 seconds each, that you took from, that has been instrumental in shaping your leadership style, or things you've had to unlearn?
Ability to adapt, ability to survive. For me, that was the big learning in school. When you're out there, left alone as a 12-year-old, you better learn how to survive.
H House was tough.
H House
I
was
know.
tough, man.
I can attest to that.
It was a bed of roses compared to
Yeah,
Jaipur
we
House,
got
I
all
can
the
assure
guys
you.
here. I see Pop sit here, Alag here, lots of people here. We had to survive. Cuckoo.
So, I'd say a sense of community and embracing that community, not just at school, but a lot more after school. One thing I would like to point out over here is in the audience, we have 4 decades of leadership of the DSOBS. And that just sort of signifies how important community is, especially to us DOSCOs.
I just say, add on to Gaurav's point, the ability to duck, dive, survive, get on with people. Very few people know this, but Goldman Sachs in its history has had something like 1,500 partners. 1% of the partners of Goldman Sachs are ex-DOSCOs. Were in the history of Goldman. Who would say, whenever somebody asks me, kind of, what is this June school thing? I say there's a tiny little school. How many ex-DOSCOs now? There's what, 6,000 ex-DOSCOs? Like 6,000. There was a time in Asia, the top 5 out of the top 5 investment banks, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, and Credit Suisse. I'm not sure they were top 5, but let's put them in there. 4 were run by ex-DOSCOs, all at the same time. The impact that we have on the world, even in the financial service industry, is kind of disproportionately high.
That's scary. That's very scary, Raghav. I'm concerned.
By the way, that was literally 2 years before the global financial crisis. So somebody will blame. There's some causation there too. But again, look, just the whole, you get in, you go in as young people, very young kids. You've got people senior to you, then you grow a little older, and you've got people junior to you, learning how to get on with those people, learning how to negotiate, doing the exchanges of cutlets for eggs, and learning commerce from Sattu and all that sort of stuff. Like all that is added. That was learning, which clearly had an impact.
Thank you, Rahul.
So let me give you the good and the bad. So the good, resilience. I think we've often sort of used this word in this forum in today. But school teaches you that. You get beaten up, you stand up, you get sort of pushed to the end, you get back in on your feet. So resilience, I think to me, Dune has taught me that. The bad, even now, when I go out to a restaurant with family, I will always gravitate to the buffet, which has got the crappiest food. But because there's so much of it available, I will always go for that. So that unfortunate habit yet remains.
And there you have it. Mental health, food as a coping mechanism has not left anyone from school. Thank you, everyone. And I apologize, we've gone a few minutes over time, but thank you. Chut Dallas, Pumpkin, Maliah, and Nomchi. It's been a real masterclass in just reflections on your journeys and lessons in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We have a small token of appreciation for you also, if you could just stay on stage. Yeah. And we'll also take a photograph.
Well done, thank you.
Good prep work. लो भाई हो गया सारे वापसी